Welcome to another episode of A Day in the Life of Rural Reentry. And for today's episode, I thought that we would talk a little bit about criminal justice reform and accountability. So let's start by defining what is the criminal justice system. People often ask me, you talk about reform, Jodi, but what does that mean? Well, the way that we define the system here at RI is it's the way that our society arrests, adjudicates, sentences, incarcerates, and then ultimately reintegrates the people who break the law. And when I bring up accountability and how incarceration doesn't work and doesn't get us to the goal that we want, healthier and safer communities, people will often push back and say, but wait a minute, Jodi, don't people who break the law need to be held accountable? What about accountability? So let's define accountability. Webster's defines accountability as ultimately taking responsibility for one's actions. Interestingly, Webster's also defines accountability not as punishment. I thought that was interesting when I looked up the definition that Webster says it's not punishment. And there are a lot of different definitions of accountability depending on context. But when it comes to the criminal justice system, the one I like the best is that accountability is ultimately doing sorry. Not feeling sorry, not wishing sorry, but doing sorry. That's taking accountability for your actions when you break the law. So let's break down those 5 aspects of the criminal justice system and look at where there are opportunities in those to do sorry. So first of all, you get arrested. And when someone is arrested in this country, you have the right to remain silent. And I highly recommend that if you are ever arrested, that you exercise that right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That is not the time to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Or here are the circumstances around why I committed this crime. No, you have the right to remain silent. And because you do, there's no opportunity to do sorry. The next step is to adjudicate, and that's going through the court system. And whereas we think that you have the right to a trial before a jury of your peers, the reality is that once you enter the court system, a prosecutor is most likely going to hit you with the hardest charges possible, throw the book at you, as we used to say, to motivate you to take a plea deal. And in this country right now, 90% of all criminal convictions are the result of a plea deal. Interestingly, 30% of all wrongful conviction exonerations had a plea of guilty in the original proceedings. That's an episode for another day, but chew on that for a minute. The reality is, in the process of adjudication, there's still no opportunity for the person who has broken the law to do sorry and to make things right again. After you go through the court system, then you're going to be sentenced. And in this era of mandatory minimums, I voted for some mandatory legislation in the 90s as well. Most of us who were of voting age back then did. In the era of mandatory minimums, we have taken away the ability of a judge to look at the circumstances of the crime and determine what the best sentence is. Maybe incorporate a little doing sorry into the sentence. Now, I will say that probation and also treatment courts do leave a little bit of room for doing sorry and taking accountability for one's actions, but those are considered alternatives to incarceration. In this country, the presumption is that if you break the law, commit a felony, at least that is, that you will be incarcerated. And so there's not a lot of opportunity for doing sorry in the sentencing aspect of the criminal justice system. Sometimes at the end, say like the sentencing hearing, there'll be an opportunity for the perpetrator of the crime to say something to the court. And that is an opportunity where many people will take the chance to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But again, saying sorry is not doing sorry, and it's not accountability. So once you're incarcerated, you are not going to do sorry. The very nature of surviving prison is to show no weakness. The very nature of surviving prison is not to say you're sorry for anything, but to hide the nature of your crimes from everyone that is there. Prison is a dangerous place to be vulnerable, a very dangerous place to be vulnerable. Tack on top of that the vast majority of crime, if there is an identified victim, will come with a no contact order. You can't send a letter to the person who you hurt, to the person who you robbed, to the person whose car you stole, and say, I'm sorry. You get no contact with that person. So incarceration leaves no space for doing sorry. And then we get to the part of the system that means the most to us at Remnant Initiatives and should mean the most to you. And that's reintegration. This is when folks come back after being pushed through this system to the neighborhood that they left. And the last thing that they're going to do, A, because there's a no contact order, you can't go see the person who you may have harmed, and B, admitting that you have a criminal record is going to get in the way of getting a job, of getting housing, of getting the things that you so desperately need to actually turn your life around. Reintegration does not leave much room for doing sorry and being accountable either. We spend billions of dollars every year on a system that actually hinders what it is we all want. We want safer, healthier communities where every citizen takes accountability for their actions, where every citizen has the opportunity to have a good job, to pay their rent, their mortgage, to pay their taxes, to raise their children, to take those kids to the park and know their neighbors. And yet everything about the criminal justice system thwarts the opportunity to take accountability for one's actions and become a responsible, contributing citizen. That's why it needs reform. And we see the failure of this system to help people learn accountability and take accountability in the sad reality that folks return to the community in worse shape than they left it. I'm not okay with that. Are you?